This is episode number 173. Today we're featuring artist Lori Putnam.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. I hope wherever you're listening, no matter where in the world you are, you're able to get out and do some painting. I know, these have been strange times. I've had a chance to paint some fields of colorful wildflowers recently. It's been warm enough to go down by the lake, too, for some painting. And I'll soon be in the Adirondack Mountains for some painting. And it seems like every summer I tell myself I'm going to paint every single day at least one time, and then I never seem to get it done. So my plan this year is to actually leave an easel set up somewhere close on the porch or something outside near the house so I could just grab it and go do a quick painting of something just to stay in practice. I hope you're considering finding a way to do that too. Before we know it, it's going to be time for the Publishers Invitational in the Adirondacks. Yes, it got rescheduled. No longer in June, but now in late July. You can learn more about it at publishersinvitational.com. And of course, the PleinAir Convention was also rescheduled to August, and people are signing up in droves. Yes, finally. Ready to be out and get out and celebrate together. So it's going to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico this year, and it's our only summertime convention. Normally it's in the spring. So if you're a summer-only person, meaning you can only get out in the summertime because you're a student or a teacher or whatever your job is, that you only can get that summertime off, join us this year. The weather that time of year is perfect, I hear. Learn more at PleinAirConvention.com and see our spectacular lineup of faculty this year. The lowest payment plans expire at the end of the month, and also at the end of the month, the PleinAir Salon $27,000 art competition wraps up. So you want to get your entries in. You could win a $15,000 grand prize and the cover of PleinAir magazine. And even if you win in an individual category, there are 22 categories, even if you win in any of those, you are entered into the national competition, but there's also monthly prizes too. So go to PleinAirSalon.com. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering some art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. And one more thing, if you're new to plein air painting, I really encourage you to get that book, 240 Tips, PleinAirTips.com. Let's get right to the interview with Lori Putnam. Lori Putnam, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's taken forever to get around to getting this done. We should have done it way, way, way long ago, but I'm glad you're here today.
Well, thank you. We just both been busy.
Well, we are busy. That's for crazy sure. So, Lori, for the people out there, the well over 2 million downloads now that have listened to this podcast around the world in probably 70 different countries. Not everybody here is aware of you, but not everybody in the world is. So tell us a little bit about how you would describe yourself as a painter.
Okay, well, let's see. I haven't been painting quite as long as a lot of folks might think, given if they could see my age. But I am a very hard-working painter, and I paint in oils. I suppose if you want to label it, it's somewhere between mostly impressionistic, a little toward abstraction at times. And I am lucky to be one of the ones who gets to do this full time, and I'm having a ball.
And we're going to talk about your career and your development of your career, but at some point in this, You mentioned this abstraction thing, and that's very hot right now. I've talked to people at a lot of the plein air shows who say that seems to be what people are leaning towards, what buyers are leaning towards, are things that tend to be a little bit more abstract. Do you want to talk about that concept a little bit and why it is that you go there?
Well, for me, from the very beginning, since I started to first learn to paint, I have wanted to learn some of the traditional ways just to know how they're done. But I felt like inside, like in my soul, that wasn't really what made me happy. And so really all along, I have wanted to be, I guess, for lack of a better term, a looser painter. And it's always been something I've strived for, to get looser and looser and looser. And I think that an abstract painting really is the basis for any kind of painting. If it's a really strong abstract painting, then the finishing is an individual thing. That's more about your technique and your style and all of that. But you're right, there does seem to be a trend right now, and I say trend because it will, it has to have a label and it'll come and go. But there seems to be a trend right now where people are, collectors are either drawn to very highly rendered work or very close to abstracted work, although it's still representational. Somewhere in the middle, I think might have gotten a little watered down. There was so much that was so alike in the plein air world for a while. You could go to a show and everything looked alike. And so people began trying to actually branch out and, find their own way to be a little bit different. It came to me in a more realistic way, a little by accident. I had the opportunity to just paint for a couple of hours, one afternoon in particular. I remember it so vividly. And it was painting I wanted to enter into a competition if it turned out okay, but I really had no expectation because I only had a couple of hours, so there was no expectation, none. And that was freeing instead of saying I have to do this and I have to enter. And that freedom, it's one of those paintings that just sort of happened all on its own, and it was that abstracted feeling. There was no kitschy sort of technique to it. It just all came about the way I wish that more of them did on their own. And I think it was the letting myself go to be able to do that. But the trend seems to follow more, I think, a technique right now, which I stay away from, rather than an idea, which I grasped. It's more technique based, and I don't think that will last forever, because once everybody's doing that, then you got to find some other technique.
Well, I want to probe this a little bit further. I remember one time we were out camping as a family, and we were near the coast of California, and the sun was about to go down, and we had small kids, and we had to be busy with them the whole time. So I said to Lori, hey, I want to just go do a quick sunset painting across the road at the lighthouse. I ran over there, set up my easel. The wind was blowing about 60 miles an hour. I had to have one hand holding the easel, the other hand painting, and it was a 9 by 12 or small painting, and the sun was going down fast, and I literally had 5 minutes to slap together that painting. And when I was done with it, and much afterwards, and even still to this day, it's one of my favorite paintings that I've ever done. And I think it's because I didn't have time to think. I could only be instinctual. But how does one train one's brain to learn that, to go in that direction? Because you see, and I'm not being critical of this because everybody's got their way, but you see some people holding their paintbrush like a pencil and noodling every little tiny little detail.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's
Mm-hmm.
some really beautiful paintings that way as well. But how do you get to the point where you can be free? Because it isn't as easy as it looks.
No, it's not. And a lot of people, students will come to me and that's what they say, I want to loosen up. I want to free up. How do I do that? And it's really difficult to go after that. I think you have to let go and let it come to you. It's it's hard to teach, be free. I mean, I do some exercises with the students to free them up where, they're holding the brush from further away or, one of the things that I did when I first realized that I was never going to loosen up was I always put a trash can between where I was standing and my easel, so I couldn't get too close. But still, it's more of a mindset, and that's the thing that you really can't teach, that how to just let go and whatever it is that makes you dance, do that with your paint and don't worry how it turns out. And so if that thinking about, something distracting, if that's listening to music, if that's just, deciding that today I'm going to ruin something. How can I ruin this? What's the best thing I can do? And obviously grabbing weird tools and things to do that with is all fun and everything. But like you said, you just don't, I have to do a lot of preparatory work, I think, when I'm going to start a painting. And for me, it's a matter of feeling like, I've prepared, I've got my materials ready, I've got my plan ready, everything's great. But
it sounds to me like part of that freedom comes from confidence.
Well, I was going to say the very best paintings then come when I've really just thought about the subject more than really planned for the subject. Maybe I've walked past that same scene a million times and it's in my head and I feel that scene in my head. And so the preparatory work is a little more on a subconscious level. I took the time to really observe and think rather than just say, I've got this great photo, there's something in here, and I'm going to work out a design from it.
Okay, and let's go ahead. You finish that thought. And I'll jump in.
Oh, no, so it's just that having that then, okay, I've got that in my head, and like I said earlier, I've only got a couple of hours, and I'm going to use it to throw paint up here with what's going on inside about that scene. The best time is when I'm not painting from a photograph.
So let's go through this scenario. You're outdoors, you find a spot, there's something that is inspiring you in that spot. Walk me through your process up to the point of beginning the painting.
Well, assuming that I'm out there to paint, that I'm not just out there to observe, because I don't think we give ourselves enough time to just go out and observe without paint with us. But let's say that I'm out there and my job for the day is to paint outside. I do take the time to really walk around. Maybe I'm driving down the road and something stops me in my tracks. I want to remember what stopped me in my tracks, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily the very best angle or the very best composition. It could just be that some color grabbed me and I had to turn my car around and stop. And so I take time to really walk around and think about it. And then work out on little thumbnail sketches, 2 or 3 little thumbnails that could be a decent composition and why or why not. Now, the most important thing, once I think one has a good feel to it, a good balance or imbalance really, to maybe it's a light and shadow scene, maybe it's a whole lot of shadow and very little light, like percentage-wise, and it feels like it's got the good balance that made me stop in my tracks in the first place, then I have to start making some notes that will lead me to being able to start. So for me, that would be notes about value or color or something that's going to change really rapidly, because I've spent all this time studying, and I've spent another 10 or 15 minutes on thumbnail sketches, and now I know what I want, and it's all going to change in about 15 more minutes, So I have to really make some decisions, like anticipate the problems, I guess, of what is going to happen once I get this thing started. What am I going to want to know in 30 minutes that I can only observe right now? And I make those notes, and I get that down, and I really refer to that often.
You're physically taking notes?
Yeah, physically taking notes. Now, the longer you paint in plein air, the more you develop a visual memory, and you remember those things. But it still doesn't hurt to I'll literally write it down. Things that are a certain value, what value that is, what color that is, how it relates to some other color, what is the most intense color, and how intense is that really? And I make all those notes because it's just going to change so fast. But there's something about having my little cheat sheet there of how the scene appealed to me before I ever got the paint out that gets me through the painting without having to stop and wonder and ask questions that no longer make sense and chase the light and change the colors. And, it doesn't feel like morning anymore. It feels like noon and all of that.
So so you're in this scenario, get your easel set up, and you start your painting, and you're making your painting based on the thumbnail sketch that you've provided yourself, that you've decided on. And then all of a sudden something happens that you think improves the composition. The clouds change, and you go, oh, I want to grab the clouds like that. Do you ever do that, or do you just always stick to your composition notes no matter what?
Well, I would say, again, that's going to depend on a couple of things. If I'm out there to get a painting that needs to be framed, let's say for a plein air festival, if I'm going to incorporate something new into the composition, I need to put that on my thumbnail sketch and see if it works before I just start painting. If I'm out there painting for growth, just to learn, it's not going to matter if I stick those clouds in there, even though they weren't in the original composition, because nobody may ever see that painting. It's I want to grab that shape or that value or that color, and I don't care as much if this becomes less of a sellable product and more of a learning, opportunity.
So are you taking these studies back to the studio and then saying, all right, I'm going to make a studio painting out of these if they're successful, or are you just using them purely for learning?
No, I do use them for painting in the studio. As a matter of fact, I would much rather paint from a study than a photograph. A lot of times I paint from nothing but the study and never look at a photograph. But what happens when I get back in the studio is then, you've got that luxury of time to think about what went wrong. I mean, it doesn't even have to be that successful of a study, but there's something in it. And you can put your mind back where you were and say, oh, yes, I remember now. This is the whole reason I stopped there in the first place, and I totally missed that when I painted it. But there will be something in that sketch that makes it usable in the studio, even if it's, 3 square inches or something of it. But, and sometimes I'll use more than one sketch to inform, something I'm trying to create in the studio. When I paint from photographs, in the studio, it is so much better if I have some sketches, at least from the area or from that type of light, from that area, even if they're really bad sketches, but they've got that color of that light in them, that's really so much more important to have for a reference to me in the studio. That plein air stuff.
Well, you mentioned that you prefer to paint from studies. At least I got that out of it. I'm not sure if that's right.
Yeah.
I have actually gotten to the point where I won't paint from a photograph unless, like I need a figure to drop into a studio painting or something. I might flip through my photos. But I've gotten to the point where photos to me are soulless or empty or something, and I just can't get into it anymore, so I just stopped doing it. And so I only paint from studies. What is the way to be able to paint from a photograph and make it work?
Well, I think you have to get past the photograph. So if you're first starting out and you go out and you paint in plein air, there's so much to learn from nature, right? And you're learning, everything it's throwing at you. It is throwing at you, at 100 miles an hour. And I think first you have to use plenty of plein air time to learn from nature and spend time learning what's really happening. And then when you get in the studio, you get to a point where you have this, I don't mean that it's like a bag of tricks, not that at all, but you have knowledge that you've gained, and you're working on a studio painting, and let's say you have a photograph, somebody just has to have this painting of their house or whatever, and you have a photograph from which to work. You're taking all of that knowledge that you got from nature, and you're saying, I don't want to be a slave to this photograph. Yeah, it has to look like their house, but I'm going to create this existence, this story about this house using knowledge I've learned from nature. And so that's when you just get to be creative. And I do paint from photographs. I have to quite often, but it never is a copy of that photograph because it can be so limiting to look at that photograph. It's always about the time or the place or the feel of the thing, and that can only come from either knowledge you've gained or from actually going out and doing some studies there before you paint it inside, I think.
Makes a lot of sense. So what's your best recommendation to somebody who approaches you and says, look, I want to learn this plein air painting thing. Where do I start? What should I do? There's this debate. Some people think that the best way to learn plein air painting is not to go outdoors. And what I mean by that is that, some people don't know painting. And so I think that one of the most difficult things to do is to go outdoors and learn how to use paint, learn how to mix color. It seems like those are the things you need to master under a controlled environment before you go outdoors. Is that a yes or a no?
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
It is a lot. It is a lot. And I think plein air painting, you know the old saying, it's the hardest sport there is, plein air painting. But I also know a lot of people who have been studio painters for years and are very confident and do so well in their studio work that it crushes them when they go outside and can't do it. They're literally just, it's like they go into shock.
That's what happened to me. I was able to create a decent painting in the studio, but when I got outdoors the first few times, it was horrible.
Yeah. And I think it's just, it can all go hand in hand because honestly, what you're learning is coming at you from so many different directions anyway. And if you I know people that just enjoy being outdoors more than they do indoors. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's an individual thing. But, I've had students who have been, they've come out of a 5-year atelier and they take a plein air class just assuming that because there are some things they can do like a master painter or a master artist, it will be easy. And I mean, I've had to talk them down off a cliff, because it's just different. It's really so different. And so I think if you can learn to paint in plein air and continue to study in plein air and just continue to hone your skills, it informs your studio painting. And I think your studio painting and the times that you can't get outdoors will inform your learning in plein air. I think they go together.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I've had exactly that same thing happen. I had somebody with me on one of my trips who was classically trained, came out of an atelier, and tried to do plein air painting for the first time, and it was they were very frustrated. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's better just to start out learning it that way. Interesting. So the process of learning. Okay, you start out. You go plein air painting. What's the first thing you tell people to do? Do you suggest they do value studies? Do you suggest they do limited palette? Do you suggest they do small paintings? What is it that you would recommend to a beginner plein air painter?
Well, when I'm teaching at that level, we do use a limited palette. And by limited, I mean 3 colors and white.
Yeah.
I don't mean limited like 13 colors, which is limited for some folks.
Yeah, that's true.
But and I try to get them. I'll walk them through a demonstration, but I don't necessarily take it to a point of finish. I take it to a point that I might expect them to get to, which is they can go ahead and use color. But rarely do I take color away. Occasionally I do and ask them to just do it, in value. But I ask them to make small sketches, and rather than trying to paint a painting, because that's not what it's about, to make small sketches. And those sketches should really be comprised of about 3 values. And within those values, they can have a couple of different colors, but the value needs to hold together. And I want it to look, I tell them I want it to look, and this is the way I think about when I first see a scene, I want it to look like I just had a few sheets of construction paper that I had to tear out and stick on there and make that work. And if they take it further than that, they're just wasting time. And so I think when people first start out, they want so much to paint something that they're going to, especially if they're on a workshop that, over in Italy or somewhere, they want to bring home a lovely painting. But that's not what it's about. What they really are trying to do is to learn to see and simplify, and all of the stuff that has to do with how to put the paint on and all of that will just come over time. It's more important to help them learn to see and divide those big shapes. And if I can get somebody to try that over and over and over and over again, they learn so much faster than, if there's somebody that they think they need to finish a painting for. So I encourage people to do small sketches, like 6 by 8, something like that. Some beginners, really and truly, it takes most of the morning session to get set up. And I don't push them, It's scary. It's a scary thing. And so if I note that somebody is really procrastinating out of fear, then I try to find something to just make them comfortable. Something they can do that'll make them comfortable. Because if they start to feel comfortable, they will come back the next day. So if a beginner goes out and they just, their easel falls over and they, everything they paint just looks either black or white, and they just feel frustrated. It's not doing any good. So I would say, if you've never gone out before, just get used to your equipment first. Take some 6x8s or take a 12x16 and divide it into 4 pieces, and just pretend you are, about 5 years old, and just fill in those 4 little 6x8s, and don't worry about it, because you're learning by doing that.
I think that sometimes, and I'm not trying to be critical or judgmental of anybody, but I oftentimes at workshops, I see people who will carry a roller cart with so much stuff on it. It's almost like they're taking their studio outdoors. And by the way, I did that when I first started painting outdoors.
Yeah, right.
And it to me, it feels like they're disadvantaging themselves right out of the box because they've just got so much to deal with. When in reality, you need 4 tubes of paint, an easel, some paper towel, a couple of brushes, and some solvent, and that's pretty much all you really need.
Yep, that's right. It's exactly right. And I did the same thing. I can remember the very first time I ever painted in plein air. I didn't really know that's what it was, but I was in Italy, and I had, hauled all the way to Italy a 20 by 24 canvas, stretched canvas, and one of those little wooden easels that really wouldn't hold a piece of paper, on it, that is just really spindly, and anyway, and a big paint box and all these paints, and I was so excited, and a huge, heavy wooden box just to bring the painting home in. And I have pictures, gratefully. So I'm so thankful my husband was with me, and I have pictures of him hauling that wooden box across fields in Chianti, trying to find one thing for me to paint. And that was a huge lesson, when I found out that that's really, that's not really what people do. That's not the best way to start anyway. And that's, of course, when we came home and invented wet painting carriers, but that were made out of styrofoam. But you just learn over time that you just really don't need a whole lot. I mean, but the only thing I would add to your supply list is a bottle of water,
Yeah, bug spray.
But that's it. And people will come to a workshop, particularly overseas, we'll go somewhere and they bring everything they own. And by about the 3rd day of in and out of a van, dropping them here, picking them up, taking them to lunch, they are down. This is the way I describe it. They're down to their skivvies. They have only what they absolutely have to have on them, And it's funny to watch everybody pare down from their big RV setup to a place they can paint in about 2 feet square.
Well, one of the other things about that is that you develop a rhythm, a pre-painting rhythm. The idea of setting up your easel efficiently, getting everything under control, and doing it in a relatively short order. When we have the Adirondack event, which you've attended, at the beginning of that week, I know, because I don't paint every day. I wish I could, but I don't. And at the beginning of that week, it's like the first 2 or 3 times I'm setting everything up. It's drudgery, and I'm trying to figure this out and that out, and then by the end of the week, it's like zip, 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 done, ready, and colors are out and everything's ready, and not carrying all that stuff. And I think that just the message in all of that is that, eliminate the burden because it's just getting in your way. Yeah,
and you're exhausted before you start.
Yeah.
You you really are just worn out before you ever get to the fun part.
Do you sit or stand?
I stand.
And how do you feel about sitting?
I'm sure there'll be a day where I will need to do that.
Maybe
as I
soon.
get older, maybe too soon, sooner than we think. But I love the freedom of being able to be away from the canvas. We were talking earlier about loosening up, and I paint that painting in my head from 10 or 15 feet away, and then I go up and I make 3 or 4 brush strokes, and then I go back and figure out my next chess move is what it feels like, and then I go up and do that. And a lot of times, I do have students that they need to sit for physical reasons, and I'll have to go around and say, can we get up and move you back a little bit just for a minute so you can take a look at this? And they're always surprised how much better it looks, first of all, from further away, and that they should have stopped, 45 minutes ago. And so I think for me, just being able to have that freedom of standing and moving back and then sort of coming up and attacking the canvas and then standing back is fabulous. You can tell when I get in a certain stance, okay, this is fun now. This is really fun now. This is, and I notice it, and I've had students point it out to me, and it's not something I do consciously. It just sort of happens, but it's just so much more fun to me than sitting.
But one of the things I want to talk about is your career. You and I first met at, I think it was PleinAir Convention number 1. Was it? Number 1 or number 2?
Well, we met at in the Adirondacks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The year before the first convention.
Oh, okay. That's right. So you were at the very first one, in the Adirondacks.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes,
Wow.
I was.
This year's a 10-year reunion.
Wow.
How did that 10 years go by so quickly?
No kidding. Isn't that the truth? I'm
sorry. I should have remembered that. So,
happy anniversary.
Thank you. You too. And what... It's amazing what can happen in 10 years. Tell the story of where you were, if you're willing, where you were about that time in terms of your ability as a painter, your career, and then what happened to you.
Well, the short answer is both were really bad. I didn't have very much knowledge or skill and set yet. I really felt like I was still such a beginner because I'd only been painting full time for, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so at that point. Before that, it was just part-time while I continued graphic design. And so I felt like a baby as far as my art skills were concerned. And so naturally, alongside of that, there's nothing you feel confident to market. But I just knew, I knew that at that point, because I was full-time and things were really financially difficult in my home situation, that it was going to be to my advantage that I had some marketing skills, and that I'm a hard worker. I didn't mind putting in the hours to learn and to get better and to market. And so it was, I don't have any real perception of where, quote unquote, I am, or if I'm known or not known, or how known or not known. But at that point, I can tell you it was nothing. It was zero. I was probably known at that point, if anything, that I used to be the vice president for the American Impressionist Society, which basically means I just worked a lot for another organization.
For free.
Do what?
I said for free.
Yeah, for free. That's right, for free. Yeah, I had been show chair, and then I was vice president for a short time. But yeah.
So, what were you obviously now have a big brand. You're very well known. You're very successful. You've had a lot of high marks in your career in the last 5 years, especially. What transpired? What did you do to make that all happen?
Well, some of it I feel like happened, because I went after something. Like I saw I saw this partially that it had to work or I had to quit. I mean, there was a point where I either had to make it work or I had to give it up, just financially. And I also had, so that was my mindset, there is no such thing as failure unless I want to take on a different job. But the other thing, I think, I had nothing much to do with. It just, right time, right place, good giving people in my life, who I wandered into their door at just the right time, and they said, sure, I'll help. And I've always felt like that a lot of that happened without any of my doing or anybody's doing. It just happened. Obviously, there are a lot of people I could thank who helped along the way, and I'm sure there are a lot of people I pushed my way in because I saw this is an opportunity I can't let go by. I've got to convince this person to either help me with my work or help me with my career or something,
Well, you have to be, so to that point, your mindset, your state of mind drives all of these things. You manifest, these people that come into your life are manifested through your mindset, and part of that is being locked and loaded, ready to fire bullets. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but the idea of you have a happenstance encounter with someone who can make a difference in your life and your career. You may have one chance in your lifetime to meet that person, to have an opportunity to have a dialogue with that person, and maybe to ask them for help. And so if your mind isn't in the right place, or if you're not confident enough to ask, you miss the opportunity.
Well, in my case, it was, I'm not even sure I would label it confident enough to ask. I was between a rock and a hard place, and I had no option.
Desperate.
I had to, yes, literally, I'm getting older. It's do or die, it's put up now or shut up. And, so I really never had a lot of, I never had a lot of, guts or, just, hey, salesmanship is not my thing. Marketing I can do, but salesmanship, not so much. And so it was hard. It was really, really hard to ask somebody that I was, intimidated by or just respected so much, that they couldn't possibly have time for me. But I just didn't feel like I had an option if I wanted to make it happen, So I got pretty uncomfortable and made myself do it anyway. People don't believe this, but I'm really, honestly and truly, and don't laugh, I'm an introvert, and it takes a lot for me to ask people to help me.
I totally get that, and I actually am as well. And it's a trained skill. It's like developing a muscle, right? You know that as an introvert, you have to develop that extrovert muscle. It may be hard to use, it may be hard to trigger, and you may have to go and lay in bed with a book for 3 days after doing it because it was so difficult. But you have to develop that muscle to succeed.
But you're right. When you figure out that, wow, this could be my only chance to ever even meet this person, much less, say, hey, would you like to grab a cup of coffee, and I'm shaking in my boots or whatever. But if you miss that opportunity, oh wow, how sad would you be?
Well, I have a story about it. So, and I don't want to, I'll be quick because I don't want to make this about me, but I think it makes
No, go ahead.
When I was a radio DJ in Miami, I made extra money by being a wedding photographer and a disco DJ. And so I got a job doing the wedding of this woman who worked at the radio station. And the man she was marrying was a recording engineer for the Bee Gees. So I'm photographing this wedding, and the people who are in the wedding are, Robin Gibb and Andy Gibb, and, all these people. And they invited me. They said, I photographed the wedding, I photographed the reception. Then they invited me to an after party at their house, and I said no. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing to do. I said no. I said thank you very much. But what was really going on in my head is I don't deserve to be invited there. And I look back on that and think, what would have changed in my life if I'd have gone to that after party, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how much of an introvert I was.
No, I get that. I get that so much. I have said no, not to the Bee Gees, but I've said no when somebody, said, hey, after the opening tonight, we're going to whatever. But the feeling I got was, we're inviting you because you're standing here, not because we really want you to come.
Yeah, which is our head playing games with us.
And my feeling inside was, I would be scared to death in this crowd. I would have nothing to say, and that would only make me more awkward than they already think I am. And I just go home. I just go home. It's just better all around for me to go home.
So how do you deal with that now? Have you gotten to the point where you've trained yourself to be able to accept those invitations?
I think I only accept the invitation if, one, I really want to, or two, it is a matter of respect of the other person. I'd never, ever, ever, ever just go because I think it's going to get me somewhere. It just doesn't work. I know me. It's like if I am riding a bicycle off, over a bridge, I would just turn and go, don't drive off the bridge, and drive off the bridge. And that's the way those things make me feel, but if it's something that's out of respect or something I think would really be enjoyable, then I go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's good. That means you're being judicious about your life and your career, and you're not just jumping at every opportunity. So, yeah. We're going to roll out of time here in a couple of minutes, and I just want to make sure that we've covered the things that you want to cover, because you're so eloquent in the way you've described so many things, and I want to make sure that maybe if there's things that we haven't talked about, we go ahead and do that now. What have we missed?
Well, let's see. I think one of the things that's important to me right now that I would like to share, and that is that finally, so quickly, when I was a young adult, I had this calling that I felt very strongly about, to do some mission work. And I was, I was young and had no idea how to make it happen, and scared to death, and just sort of let that go. And the thing I'm so excited about right now is that in the last few years, I've gotten involved with Art Ambassadors for a Colorful World, which is a group, Kevin McPherson founded it, like in 2014, I think. But it's like it's all come together. Like God not only has blessed me with being able to be a painter, but He's also given me this extra chance to do some mission work, some service work through it. And it just feels like there's really something now that feels like a reason to be doing this besides just I wanted to. It's like it's all come full circle in some way. And that's absolutely where my heart is right now. I obviously I want to continue to grow as an artist and become better at my craft and all of that, but there's a bigger picture, and I'm so grateful to get to be part of that.
Well, can you articulate very briefly for people what that is?
So, Art Ambassador for a Colorful World really began because Kevin McPherson was going to China and working with children. And really just through an idea of his and some friends and some support people who said, you have something here. You've got a great idea here. You need to do something else with that. He and Wanda and they put together a board and they started this nonprofit. And since that time, they have expanded to work in some other countries. One of them being Guatemala, and that's where I have gone a couple of times. And so what we do is we go there, we paint, the beautiful area, but we also work in a tiny village there, third world country, the most horrible, sickening, and unimaginable situations. And we just get those kids to smile. Those little children smile, and they feel confident for just a few days, and they are so loving. And I'm the one that comes home changed every time I go. And just being able to have that aspect through. I don't speak Spanish. I don't have to. I've got art. I've got paintings and color and a paintbrush that's been donated, and they're making. It's just a most fabulous thing to do, and so we do that in several different places every year, and it's something that anybody can get involved in.
How do they do that?
Anybody that. Well, if we have a website, artambassador.org, and we list our upcoming trips there. If you're not able to travel, certainly you can do some sponsorship. There's some scholarships that we give to young adults who are showing really promise of being an artist. And we've had art people graduate now with art degrees who would ordinarily not even have been in school past about the 5th grade. So it's really, there are a lot of different ways to become involved, and you can find that out on our website.
Okay, excellent. Well, Lori, this has been a pleasure to have you. There's so much more. We'll have to have you back sometime because there's a lot we could talk about. But tell us where to find you. Website? Okay,
so I've taken all of my, I do a lot of online teaching. I've taken all my online learning off of my art site. But if you start on my art site, then there's a link to that. So I would give you my art website, which is loriputnam.com. And then if you're interested in learning, there's a link to go from there to find out how to do that.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the PleinAir Podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Well, thanks again to Lori Putnam. She's very articulate, very passionate, had some really great ideas. So thank you, Lori, for doing this today. You guys ready for some art marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your art marketing questions. You can email me anytime, eric@artmarketing.com. This question comes from Sammy in upstate New York, who says, I keep hearing that I need to learn to sell and market my artwork, but I feel selling and marketing are dirty words. Can you address that? Sammy, I hear that a lot. I don't know what's caused it, but I think you could be confusing unethical marketing and high-pressure selling with the terms marketing and selling. Everybody who's in business has to do marketing. Everybody. Hospitals, doctors, lawyers, churches, charities, even the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts do marketing and selling. But marketing selling gets a bad name from those who abuse it. You know, the arm twisters, the ones who do the car commercials that are screaming at people, people who are unethical in some way. I think that's abusive. Think of it this way. If you're in the 4th grade and your teacher asks you a question and you raise your hand, in a way, that's marketing, right? You're raising your hand, putting yourself out there, finding a way to get noticed. Now, I don't recommend ever doing anything unethical in marketing or pushing yourself too hard in sales, but I also know that repetition of a good, solid, ethical message will increase your sales. So repetition is everything. And most artists are like, well, I don't want to be too out there. You can't be too out there. Maybe you could be too out there if you sent 30 emails a day, but you just got to be considerate of others. So think about this. Am I okay if my work never sells because I'm not willing to seek out ethical ways of marketing or selling? And if you're okay with that, that's fine. But chances are, if you want things to sell, you can't rely on anybody else to do it for you. You can't always rely on even a gallery to do it for you. You have to control your own destiny, your own career. And the way to do that is to really master and understand marketing. I've got lots of articles on marketing, ethical marketing at artmarketing.com. The next question comes from an anonymous listener who says, is it okay to barter with my paintings in exchange for goods or services? Well, anonymous, everything is about strategy. For instance, if there is something you would pay cash for anyway, that's part of your strategy and it helps you save cash, why not barter? For instance, let's say your strategy says that you have to have a program in the local high school yearbook. All right. Well, I wouldn't buy an ad in the high school yearbook if it wasn't part of my strategy. But they might say, well, give us a painting so we can use it for a charity auction. Well, that's a win-win. But don't buy things you don't need just because you can trade it. Right. And be careful about that too. People get into trouble with barter sometimes because they don't necessarily understand it. You want it to be part of your marketing plan if it's part of your strategy. But make sure you get dollar for dollar and document it carefully. Everything should be in writing. Also, I'm not an attorney or an accountant, but you should check with them because I think that barter is treated the same as cash, meaning you probably have to pay tax on what you receive. I haven't done barter in many years, but I remember when I did, I had to file as if it was income. And so does the person you barter with. So, can't hurt to double check. The key to barter is only saving cash that you would have spent anyway. So think about it that way. And I wouldn't overdo it. You don't want to get a reputation as somebody who does all bartering all the time. But, there might be a time to do it from time to time. One thing that happens, a lot of artists will trade paintings. It's not barter per se because you're not buying a service in exchange for a painting, but a lot of artists do just say, hey, I'll give you one of mine if you give me one of yours. Anyway, I hope this helps. This has been the Art Marketing Minute. A reminder to send me your marketing questions, eric@artmarketing.com. Hope you enjoyed the Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
A reminder to get your entry in for the PleinAir Salon Art Competition, which you got to get done before the end of the month. Use this for branding in your resume by winning a category or a ranking, and if you enter any category and you win, you're entered into the national competition. So that helps, right? Good things to talk about. That's part of your marketing. Go to pleinairsalon.com for that. And also sign up before May 31st for the lowest price on the Plein Air convention in Santa Fe or the lowest payment plan. Price is going up on May 31st. pleinairconvention.com. If you've not seen my blog on Sunday morning where I talk about stuff and things, life, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Don't put the ta-da in there. I don't know how to spell ta-da. It's always fun doing this. We'll do it again like next week, maybe. I'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine, which you need to pick up on the newsstand, assuming your newsstand is open. But you can get this good time to get a subscription, by the way, at PleinAirMagazine.com. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. I'll see you. Bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.